Hi, greetings to everyone, and welcome to my channel. So, in the continuation of our lecture series in the Introduction to Agriculture Policy and Development in the Philippines, we're going to discuss the Unit 2, the policy framework. Okay, so before we proceed to our lecture proper, please like, follow, and subscribe if this lesson really or truly help you in your studies. Okay, so in the Unit 2 of Agri 129 or 146, Introduction to Agriculture Policy and Development in the Philippines, we delve into the essential aspect of policy framework that governing our agriculture in the country. And understanding the policy landscape is crucial for students aiming to comprehend the broader context within which our agricultural development occurs. Our learning objectives first is for you to familiarize with the key policies shaping the agricultural sector in the Philippines and to analyze the implications of these policies on agricultural development and rural livelihoods, and then to evaluate the effectiveness and challenges of policy implementation in addressing agricultural issues. Okay, so here's our key concept. First is agricultural policy, the set of government decisions and actions that influence our agricultural production, market, marketing, trade, and rural development. So the policy framework is the overarching structure of policies and regulations guiding our agricultural practices and interventions. Legislation are laws enacted by the government pertaining to agriculture, land use, environmental conservation, and rural development. Next is the regulatory measures. These are rules, regulations, and administrative policies implemented by government agencies to manage agricultural activities. And then the policy interventions or implementation. These are the process of putting the agricultural policies into practice, involving planning, execution, monitoring, and evaluation. So we have a six content in this topic. Okay, so first let's take a look at the historical overview of agricultural policies. So we will be going to understand the evolution of our agricultural policies in the Philippines from colonial times to the present. Okay, agriculture has been a backbone of the Philippine economy for centuries, shaping the nation's history, the culture, and development. And understanding the evolution of agricultural policies is crucial for grasping the complex dynamics of rural livelihoods, our land tenure system, and our food security in the country. So, in this lecture, we will explore the historical trajectory of agricultural policies in the Philippines, tracing their evolution from colonial times to the present day. So, are you familiar of the picture? Okay, so this is from pre Spanish era. So this is the time of the colonial era way back 16th century to 19th century. During the Spaniard or Spanish colonial period, the colonization or our agricultural policies focus on the encomienda system, which granted land to Spanish conquistador and clergy, resulting in the exploitation of our indigenous labor and resources. And then the the agrarian structure. Large haciendas and encomiendas dominated agricultural land ownership, while indigenous communities practiced subsistence farming under the feudal conditions. The crop production These are cash crops such as sugar, our tobacco, and indigo were prioritized for export to meet the demands of the colonial economy. Okay, next is the time of the American occupation. Land tenure reforms, where the American period introduced a land tenure reforms, including the Republic Land Act of 1903 and the establishment of homesteading programs to encourage our land ownership among Filipino peasants. And in the institutional development, our agricultural institutions, such as the Bureau of Agriculture and the University of the Philippines College of Agriculture, were established to promote scientific farming practices and rural education. Next is post World War II era. During the land reform initiatives, the post war period saw the implementation of land reform program aimed at the redistributing our agricultural land to tenant farmers and sharecroppers, including the Agricultural Land Reform Code of 1955. And the Green Revolution is the introduction of high yielding crop varieties, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides under the Green Revolution, which transformed agricultural production and increased the crop yield, particularly in rice and corn farming. And then during the martial law period, way back 1970s and 1980s, Marcos land reform program during the Marcos regime implemented land reform programs such as the Presidential Decree number 27 or the Tenure Reform Act and the Agricultural Land Reform Code of 1971, which focused on land redistribution and cooperativization. And during the expansion of export oriented agriculture, the government promoted export oriented agriculture, leading to the expansion of cash crop production, such as sugar, coconut, and pineapple, for international markets. CARP, or our Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. This is the time during the post-Marcos era, way back 1986. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, the post-Marcos period, witnessed the implementation of CARP in 1988, aimed at redistributing the agricultural land to tenant farmers and promoting rural development. The challenges and reform, despite, despite efforts to address land inequality and promote agricultural productivity, our challenges such as land conversion, agrarian conflicts, and climate change, and globalization continue to impact the agricultural sector. Our conclusion is that the historical overview of agricultural policies in the Philippines highlights the complex interplay between colonial legacies, our socio-political dynamics, and economic development as we navigate the challenges and opportunities facing the Philippine agriculture. Understanding the historical context of our agricultural policies is essential for shaping informed policy decision and promoting sustainable rural development in the country. Okay, for our references and our suggested further readings related to our topic. Next is the land reform and agrarian policies. Analysis of land tenure system, agrarian reform programs, and land redistribution initiatives aimed at promoting social justice and rural development. Okay, the land reform and agrarian policies play a pivotal role in promoting social justice, equitable land distribution, and rural development in the Philippines. So, in this lecture, we will analyze the evolution of land tenure system, agrarian reform programs, and land redistribution initiatives aimed at addressing historical injustices and fostering inclusive growth in the agricultural sector. So let's take a look about the historical context of land tenure system. First, there is what we call a feudal land ownership. The Philippines has long been characterized by feudal land ownership patterns, where large haciendas and estates controlled vast tract of agricultural land, while the majority of farmers work as tenants or sharecroppers. In the Spanish colonial legacy, the encomienda system and subsequent land grant during Spanish colonization entrenched inequalities in land ownership and access, laying the foundation for centuries of agrarian exploitation. And during the Commonwealth era, as early agrarian reform efforts started, the American occupation introduced land tenure reforms such as the Public Land Act of 1903 and the establishment of homesteading programs to encourage our land ownership among Filipino peasants. And during the Commonwealth government initiated agrarian reform policies through the National Land Settlement Administration and the Agricultural Tenancy Act of 1933, aimed at improving tenant farmers' conditions and promoting agricultural productivity. And in the time of Ramon Magsaysay, for post-World War II land reform initiative, there is a what we call Magsaysay Land Reform Program, where our president implemented land reforms to measures in the 1950s, including the Rice Share Tenancy Act of 1954, which sought to empower tenant farmers and regulate sharecropping arrangements. And in Land Reform Code of 1971, where the Marcos regime enacted the Agricultural Land Reform Code, which introduced land redistribution mechanism, land ownership or landowner compensation, and tenant protection provisions. And the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program and its establishment and objectives was implemented way back 1988 under the Aquino administration with the aim of redistributing agricultural land to tenant farmers and promoting rural development and social justice. The components of the CARP included land acquisition and distribution, support services for our agrarian reform beneficiaries, agrarian justice delivery, and rural development initiatives. And then the challenges and limitations. Despite significant achievement, CARP faced challenges such as landowner resistance, land conversion, insufficient support services, and legal loopholes which hindered its full implementation. And the post-CARP reforms and challenges, the CARPER and beyond, Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program extension with reforms, extended CARP's implementation until 2014 and introduced additional provisions to address the remaining land distribution issues and strengthen support services for our agricultural reform beneficiaries. Continuing challenges: land tenure security, agrarian disputes, insufficient agrarian reform beneficiaries, and also the organization and the need for sustainable rural development remain key challenge in post-CARP agrarian reform efforts. So our conclusion is that the land reform and agrarian policies in the Philippines have been instrumental in addressing the historical injustices, promoting social justice, and fostering rural development. Despite the progress, the challenges persist, underscoring the need for comprehensive, inclusive, and sustainable agrarian reform programs. that prioritize the welfare of smallholder farmers and marginalized communities. Okay, for our references and suggested further readings. Then let's take a look in the trade and market policies, examination of trade liberalization, tariff structure, import export regulations, and market interventions affecting agricultural producers and consumers. Okay, so the trade and market policies play a significant role in shaping the agricultural sector by influencing production, distribution, and consumption patterns. So, in this lecture, we will examine the impact of trade liberalization, the tariff structures, the import export regulations, and the market interventions of agricultural producers and consumers. First, trade liberalization and agriculture. The trade liberalization refers to the reduction or removal of barriers to international trade, including tariffs, quotas, and trade restriction. So it allows the government to be open to other foreign uh, force in the agriculture aspect. And implications for our agriculture, it exposed the domestic agricultural producers to global competition, leading to change in market dynamics, pricing mechanism, and production strategies. So our economic principle, the law of demand and supply, is a very best or good example to picture out how the prices could impact the demand or the supplies of our agricultural production in our market. And the benefits, somehow, access to international markets can create opportunities for export oriented agriculture, diversification of agricultural products, and technology transfer. However, there is a setback, increased competition from imported goods, and the price volatility and vulnerability to fluctuation in global commodity markets can pose challenges for smallholder farmers and local agricultural industries. Next is our tariff structures and import export regulation. The tariff policies are taxes imposed on imported goods which can affect the competitive of our domestic agricultural products relative to imports. While our import export regulations are the including the sanitary and phytosanitary measures and technical barriers to trade and ensure the safety, the quality, and compliance of agricultural products with international standards. So the impact on our agricultural trade, tariff or the tariff structures and import and export regulations influence the volume, the composition, and direction of our agricultural trade, shaping our market access and competitiveness for our agricultural producers. Okay, so here is our demand and supply graph. Okay, so if you can see the quantity, which is in the bottom, while the price of agricultural products. Okay, so if there is a movement based on the supply, the prices are there is a what we call the changes of prices based on the movement of our supply and also the demand. Okay, the the when the quantity is low, but the demand is high, the prices are increasing. If you can see in the graph, while if the quantity is saturated and the demand is not doesn't increase or maintain its demand, the prices drops. So the price volatility affecting our agricultural market because we are being because of the trade liberalization. Our economy is being open to the international market, and if you can notice, our agricultural supply are being flooded by foreign or from foreign products, and that affects our prices, and it also caused a significant uh, impact to our farmers. They have a hard time currently. Most of our farmers have a hard time to cope up with the increasing of prices, while their commodities are not really increasing. Then let's talk about the market interventions and price stabilization. The price support mechanism, where our governments may implement price support mechanism such as minimum price guarantees, subsidies, and procurement programs to stabilize agricultural prices and income for producers. Somehow, government is also helping our farmers. And in the market interventions, including buffer stock, so our government is stored enough buffer so that in times of great demand, we have a supply so that can still meet up with that demand. And public distribution system and market infrastructure development aims to address the market failure, reduce price volatility, and ensure food security. And balancing the supply and demand is the effective market interventions to seek the balance between the supply and demand dynamics, enhance the market efficiency, and promote fair and transparent trade practices in agricultural markets. Okay, so here we have the agriculture subsidized. So based on the diagram, the Philippines with 3.1% way back 2019 has the most subsidized to our farmers. So the domestic agricultural subsidies, where the government, including inputs, subsidies, production incentives, and income support programs, can distort agricultural market by influencing the production decision and resource allocation. And in the trade dispute and negotiations, agricultural subsidies and trade distortions can lead to trade disputes and negotiations at the international level as countries seek to protect domestic agricultural interests and ensure fair competition in global markets. Our conclusion, the trade and market policies, they play a very crucial role in shaping the competitiveness, the sustainability, and resilience of the agricultural sector. By understanding the implication of trade liberalization, the tariff structures, the import and export regulations, and market interventions, our agricultural stakeholders can navigate challenges, capitalize on opportunities, and contribute to inclusive and sustainable agricultural development. Our references and our recommended um, for further readings. Okay, so let's proceed to the environmental policies. Exploration of environmental laws, the sustainable farming practices, and conservation measures aimed at promoting ecological balance and resilience in agriculture. The environmental policies play a crucial role in promoting the sustainable agriculture, conserving our natural resources, and mitigating the environmental degradation. So, in this lecture, we will explore the significance of the environmental laws, sustainable farming practices, and conservation measures aimed at promoting the ecological balance and resilience in agriculture. First is the environmental laws and regulation. These establish guidelines and standards for environmental protection and resource management for our sustainable development in agriculture. Key legislation includes Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, National Environmental Policy Act, and Endangered Species Act, among others. The objective is to regulate the pollution, prevent habitat destruction, and promote biodiversity conservation, and ensure the sustainable use of our natural resources in agriculture activities. So if you can see, the sustainable agriculture, there is an agroforestry and intercropping. And in the sustainable agriculture, it promotes crop rotation and also the animal manuring, bioagents, tillage, and green manuring. So this is part of the sustainable agriculture practices. It encompasses the range of techniques, as what I showed to you, and approaches that minimize the environmental impact. And at the same time, it will conserve the resources and enhance the ecological resilience in agriculture. Example of this is the sustainable farming practices, like our organic farming, our agroforestry, crop rotation, integrated pest management, conservation, tillage, and water conservation measures, and among others. The benefit of this, it will promote soil health, enhance biodiversity, and reduce the chemical inputs, which will lessen the pollution in our environment and conserve water resources and mitigate climate change impacts. And by doing that, it will contribute to a long-term agricultural sustainability. Okay, so in this illustration, it shows the improved productivity by doing this, having a forest conservation and protection of sensitive habitats. So, in the conservation measures and ecosystem services, we have the following: the conservation program measure, such as land stewardship program, our conservation easements, and protected area designation, aim to preserve our natural habitats, our wildlife corridors, and ecosystem services. And then in our ecosystem services, which our ecosystem provided by agriculture include pollination, fertility, water purification, and carbon sequestration and climate regulation, which are essential for our agricultural productivity and environmental resilience. And then climate change adoption and mitigation. So, in the climate smart agriculture integrates the adoption and mitigation strategies to address the climate change impacts on agriculture, including extreme weather events, shifting growing seasons, and changing precipitation patterns. In this, the mitigation strategies in agriculture includes carbon sequestration through agroforestry and conservation agriculture, and also the methane reduction in livestock production and adoption of renewable energy technologies. So if you can see in the climate change, adaptation and mitigation, here in the center is the overlapping example, the green infrastructure and water and energy conservation. So in adaptation and mitigation, they have their own goals. The adaptation involves modifying our decision, activities, and way of thinking to adjust to a changing climate. While the mitigation aims to reduce the cost of climate change, you mitigate. While our goals in the adaptation, well, in the word adaptation, for example, increasing our capacity to adapt in if you are living in the very hot weather, for example, then you need to wear a more light clothes for you to adapt to the hot climate. And if you're living in a very cold place, then you need to wear a jacket or proper clothing to really equip you in that weather. And improving the ability to thrive under different climate conditions and building resilience in extreme weather and climate change. While the mitigation, their goal is to cut down the greenhouse gas emission because that is the number one factor in contributing to our climate change. So that's why part of the mitigation, if you can see the new technology in transportation, the electric vehicles or electric bikes, that really reduce the carbon emission. Okay, so if you can see in the example, in adaptation, there is a forest protection, increased infrastructure in building design, and flood protection. While in the mitigation, there is energy and efficient technology, sustainable transportation, as what I mentioned, and renewable energy, and industrial process improvements. Okay, so that is part of our um, adaptation and mitigation. And in the policy implementation and stakeholder engagement, the government initiatives, for example, the policies through regulatory frameworks, the incentives and capacity building programs to encourage the adoption of our sustainable practices and compliance with the environmental standards. While the stakeholder engagement and collaboration among farmers, the government agencies, the NGOs, our research institution, and communities are essential for effective policy implementation, the knowledge sharing, and innovation in sustainable agriculture. In conclusion, environmental policies play a critical role in promoting our sustainable agriculture, conserving our natural resources, and safeguarding ecological integrity in agricultural landscapes. By embracing the sustainable farming practices, adhering to environmental regulations, and promoting conservation measures, agricultural stakeholders can contribute to building resilient and environmentally sustainable food system for future generations. For our references and for your future or for your further readings. Then let's take a look in the rural development strategies, assessment of rural development programs, infrastructure projects, and community-based initiatives aimed at improving the quality of life in rural areas. So the rural development is essential for creating a sustainable livelihoods, reducing the poverty, fostering inclusive growth in rural areas. So in this lecture, we will assess the rural development programs, our infrastructure projects, and community-based initiatives aimed at improving the quality of life in rural areas. First is the importance of the rural development. The rural-urban disparities, where rural areas often face challenges such as limited access to basic services, inadequate infrastructure, the low agricultural productivity, and unemployment contributing to rural-urban disparities. So we need to understand that there's really a disparity. No? So sustainable development goals, where the rural development align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including goals related to poverty reduction, our food security, health, education, and gender equality. Okay, so in this picture, it shows the image of a rural development goal. It provides a sustainable and livelihood to uh, our to the people within the rural community. So in the rural development programs, the government initiatives implement rural development programs that aim at addressing the socio-economic challenges, promoting agricultural productivity, and enhancing the rural livelihoods. For example, our rural development programs may include land reform initiatives, agricultural extension services, and credit facilities, social protection programs, and skill training for our rural youth and women and men. And towards inclusive growth through broad-based agro-industrial development, if you can see, we have a commercial smallholders where full market integration and smallholders in transition where farms to market links and subsistence farmers and marginal fishers where food security and marketable surplus. Next is our infrastructure projects. Access to our basic services which our infrastructure projects focused on improving the access to basic services such as clean water, sanitation, electricity, healthcare, education, and transportation in rural areas. While our rural roads and connectivity, if you can see nowadays, that the effort of our government is to really develop our road networks. These investments in rural roads, our bridges, and transportation networks enhance the connectivity, facilitate market access, and promote rural-urban linkages for agricultural products and rural enterprises. And then in our community-based initiatives, participatory development approach, where the community-based initiatives emphasize participatory decision-making, community empowerment, and local ownership of development projects. Example is our community-based initiatives may include community-managed water system, cooperative enterprises, where women self-help group, and community-led natural resource management initiatives. Challenges and opportunities. Institutional capacity, strengthening the institutional capacity at the local, regional, and national level is crucial for effective planning, implementation, and monitoring of rural development initiatives. And the sustainability, where sustainable rural development requires long-term investments, multi-sectoral collaboration, and integration environmental, where social and economic dimensions of development. And empower and inclusion, where ensuring the active participation and inclusion of marginalized groups, including women, youth, indigenous peoples, and smallholder farmers is essential for equitable and inclusive rural development. In conclusion, rural development strategies encompass a range of interventions aimed at addressing socioeconomic challenges, enhancing the infrastructure, and empowering the rural communities to improve their quality of life. By fostering inclusive and participatory approaches, leveraging local resources and promoting sustainable practices, rural development efforts can contribute to building resilient and vibrant rural communities. Okay, for our references and for your further readings. So for our last topic is about the policy challenges and opportunities. So we will be discussing on the challenges facing agricultural policy implementation, including institutional constraints, political dynamics, socio-economic disparities, and environmental degradation, and identifying the opportunities for our policy reform and innovation to address the emerging agricultural issues. Okay, so the agricultural policy implementation faces a myriad of challenges and opportunities shaped by our institutional constraints, political dynamics, our socioeconomic disparities, and environmental degradation. So, in this lecture, we will discuss these challenges and identify the opportunities for policy reform and innovation to address emerging agricultural issues. First, the institutional constraints. We have limited capacity. Many agricultural institutions face constraints such as the inadequate human and financial resources, weak institutional capacity, and bureaucratic inefficiencies, hindering the effective policy implementation and service delivery, and also the coordination and collaboration. Fragmentation and lack of coordination among government agencies, our civil society organizations, and stakeholders often lead to overlapping mandates, duplication of efforts, and disjointed policy interventions. And also our political dynamics. Political interests. Agricultural policies are influenced by political interests, power dynamics, and vested interests where which may prioritize short-term gains over long-term sustainability and equitable development, and also policy instability. Political transitions, changes in government priorities, and policy reversal can create is uncertain and instability, undermining investor confidence and impeding long-term planning and investment in agriculture. Then our socio-economic disparities. So we have rural areas where agriculture is the primary livelihood source and often face high levels of poverty, food insecurity, and limited access to basic services such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure. In the gender inequality, women farmers and rural women face systematic barriers such as limited access to land, credit, technology, and extension services, exacerbating gender disparities in agricultural productivity and income. And then the environmental degradation. The unsustainable practices are even now you can see in the most rural areas where people are still practicing kaingin and other unsustainable practices. So these intensive farming methods, the deforestation, land degradation, water pollution, and the use of chemical inputs contribute to environmental degradation and soil erosion and loss of biodiversity and climate change impacts. So then it follows our climate resilience. Nowadays, you can see there when the typhoons hit a certain region or area, flood, severe flooding, and climate variability and extreme weather events pose an additional challenge to our agricultural production, livelihoods, and food security, necessitating the adoption and resilience building measure in our agricultural policies. And then our opportunities for policy reform and innovation. The strengthening of institution, where investing in institutional capacity building, governance, reforms, and participatory decision-making process can enhance the policy coherence and coordination and effectiveness in our agricultural development, while at the same time promoting inclusive growth. Targeted interventions such as social protection programs, land reform initiatives, and gender mainstreaming policies can address our socioeconomic disparities and promote inclusive and equitable agricultural development. And in our sustainable agriculture, we are promoting the sustainable farming practices, agroecological approaches, and conservation agriculture techniques can enhance the resilience and reduce the environmental impacts and promote long-term sustainability in agriculture. In our conclusion, our last topic, policy challenges in agricultural development are multifaceted and require a holistic approach. stakeholder engagement, and innovative solution by addressing institutional constraints, navigating political dynamics, and promoting the social equity and adopting sustainable practices. Our agricultural policies can contribute to building resilient, inclusive, and environmentally sustainable food system for present and future generations. For our references and for your further readings. So, thank you very much for being part of our lecture for today. So, if you have any questions or if there's something that you want to add to our discussion, feel free to inform me. So, thank you very much, and I will see you again on our next lecture.